So my name is Mike Bredeson. I am a PhD student at South Dakota State University and an agroecologist, I guess I'd call it, for Ecdysis Ag Research Foundation. And I do a lot of integrated pest management research and figuring out ways, creative ways for us to diversify the agricultural ecosystem by incorporating lots of different cover crops and interseeding cover crops into cash crops. That's essentially what I'm all about right now. Well, I came today to talk about my research into interseeding cover crops into corn. Especially where we live, not as much corn grown in this area, but in the upper Midwest, eastern South Dakota is just one gigantic cornfield, right? And in any particular cornfield, there is one species of plant being grown, and that is a corn plant. So what I'm trying to do, and what a bunch of innovative farmers are starting to do, is diversify that system by actually planting cover crops in standing cornfields, right? Because we start growing corn early and we stop growing corn really late. And guys realize the importance of having diversity out there, but now we're trying to figure out how to do it. And we're really trying to push for this interseeding cover crops. And my job is to study the effects that that diversity has on the insect community. The herbivores, the predators, the detritivores, and this big hairball of creatures all intermingling together, and tease that apart. And what we're finding is that by adding just a little bit of plant diversity in cornfields, we see a whole heck of a lot of improved ecosystem services provided by that once kind of desolate corn ecosystem. We're getting better predation of herbivorous insects, so those pests that are eating our corn plants are getting gobbled up by predators because we're providing other resources such as pollen and nectar for them to survive on, so they can establish and be in these corn systems and be there kind of as an army at the ready for when pest insect decides to come in, and they can take care of that problem biologically, and we can prevent the further use of chemical control, chemical applications. So that's what I'm here today to talk about, and it seems to be getting received rather well, and I'm anticipating more and more acres looking a little bit different from now on, not just corn, but corn plus a lot of other interesting things too. A lot of farmers are pretty skeptical about, we're having trouble managing one species out there. Now you're telling me to throw a bunch of other species out there. And really what we tell people is, in a properly designed agricultural system, those that are the most self-regulating and low input required systems are those where the producer is trying to mimic nature as closely as they can. I'm reading a book right now, and one of my favorite lines in the book is, there's no crime in plagiarizing the ways of nature. So it's kind of a good motto to have as a farmer. And it can be daunting to say, all right, I'm going to put peas and flax between my corn. Now I got to worry about all sorts of different bugs that I already don't understand. But what can be certain is that when we diversify that agricultural ecosystem, overall insect diversity goes up. And along with that, we have some more herbivore diversity coming in. But a lot of times, since we're providing the resources needed for a sustained predator and beneficial insect community, we totally eliminate the need for chemical application. And when we speak to farmers who decide to start using the cover crops and go into this the soil health movement, the input that they can axe first every time is the insecticide, because you get those insect communities established. Predator communities now are at a level where they can prevent a pest community from getting out of control. There will be some pests, of course, as there should be in any natural system. There needs to be herbivores, but they're at a level now where they're self-regulating, and the second when we come in all of a sudden with an insecticide, it hits the reset button, because an insecticide doesn't specify on which insects it's killing. It kills insects. Insecticide kills insects. Both those that are eating plant tissue and those that are providing services to you in the form of predation of those pests, right? So they're eating those bugs that are eating your crops. So they're also toast. They're dead. And the way that the biology of a lot of these insects works is their reproduction and their life cycle is really quick. It's rapid, these herbivores. And they can pick up rather quickly. And the predator community, they're a little bit longer lived, and their numbers take a little bit longer to increase. So it's termed the pesticide treadmill. Once you use one pesticide, you're always trying to stay on top of it. And additional chemical applications are often needed in order to knock back that herbivore community, because your predator, your beneficial insect community, is never given a chance to come up to that level where it needs to be at to match the herbivore community and manage it naturally without chemicals. Something that isn't talked about near enough and really needs to be focused on is the community of arthropods, insects, below the soil surface. You know, we are at a soil health meeting, and we really need to hone in on this enormous diversity of organisms that are milling about and interacting with the soil and eating dead plant matter, and essentially they're pooping out stable soil aggregates, right? And when you look at the total abundance of herbivores and predators, and then these things that are in the soil called detritivores, things that are eating the dead plant matter, that community is so huge and enormous and massive compared to these other communities. It can't be ignored any longer. We really need to focus on those more. And for guys that are concerned about soil health, these organisms that are in the soil, they're directly shaping the physical properties of soil. They're helping you return those nutrients that are tied up in dead vegetative plant matter and helping to mineralize them and make them available to your next year's crops. So they are, of all the different guilds, types of insect groups out there, for healthy soils, we need to focus more on those inconspicuous critters that are in that black box of soil that we don't know that much about, but we're going to be hearing about it more and more. And the more we can do as farmers to design our system in a way that props those communities up, our soil is going to become healthier. A really tough question that I get is, so when do I plant my cover crops down my standing corn rows? And what do I plant? Oh my gosh, that's a really hard question, but it's a question that needs to be asked. And I can tell a producer, a farmer, what I think that they should use, because I've experience with it in my region, my area. But you go 10 miles away and the soil is completely different. Their goals are completely different. And all that I can tell a producer is to just try your darndest to educate yourself on what plants, what cover crops can I incorporate in this system that are going to work with my soil types and meet the goals that I have for my own field. Because everybody's goals are a little bit different. Some guys in South Dakota, for example, they're really concerned about having pheasant habitat later on in the season. And those needs, those goals are completely different. We manage that totally different from someone who has a bunch of cattle and is going to go out after you take that corn off the field and graze it, right? So it's not a cookbook type system where you can say, all right, it's easy, this is my planting date and this is what I will plant. It really is going to take some ecologically minded farmers who are really hungry to attain information on their own, and it's going to take some trial and error. But the farmers that are doing it right now, that are interseeding cover crops in their standing corn, they're not going back. They're making mistakes and changing and fine-tuning every year. But what speaks volumes is the fact that even though they're making some mistakes, the successes that they're seeing far outweighs it, and they're not looking back. They're continuing to do this. So that speaks the greatest volumes in my mind.